The storm had been building all day, rolling over the high plains in slow, dark swells, as if the sky itself were a restless ocean. Shane Hollister, broad as a barn door and just as weather-worn, rode hunched in the saddle with his coat pulled close, letting his horse find its own way along the narrow valley trail. The rain came in sudden bursts, needling his face, then easing just enough to make him think it might be over, only for the wind to shove another wall of water across the land. It was the kind of night when decent folks stayed inside, and trouble wandered loose. It was there, between a stand of twisted pines and the washout edge of the trail, that he saw her, a shape sprawled in the mud, half hidden by the brush. For a heartbeat, he thought it might be a bundle of rags blown off a wagon. Then the lightning flared, sharp and white, and he saw a face, pale beneath streaks of dirt, eyes closed, lips parted in shallow breaths. Her dress was torn, one sleeve hanging loose, and a cut along her temple bled in a thin, slow trickle. He swung down from the saddle without thinking. His boots sank in the muck as he knelt beside her, pressing 2 fingers to her neck. There it was, faint but steady. He could have left her there. Whoever she was, someone might be looking for her. But in the rain, in that valley far from help, she was nothing but a dying thing. He gathered her into his arms, her weight smaller than he'd expected, the warmth of her fading under the cold rain. He didn't know her name, didn't know the story behind those bruises, but he knew the night wouldn't forgive him if he rode away. And as he lifted her onto his horse, a question rose that he couldn't yet answer: who had left her to the storm, and why? His cabin lay an hour's ride deeper into the hills, a squat shape of pine logs with a roof that still leaked in the wrong wind. By the time they reached it, she was barely stirring. He pushed the door open with his shoulder, carried her to the cot by the fire, and worked to strip away the soaked outer layers. The fire popped and spat as he coaxed it higher, laying a blanket over her, tucking it around her shoulders as if the act itself might anchor her to this side of life. He cleaned the cut at her temple with a rag dipped in boiled water, his rough hands careful, almost reverent. Somewhere in the long night, she stirred and whispered something, a single word in a tongue he didn't know, soft as the last note of a song. It tugged at him in a way he didn't understand, the way a half-forgotten memory sometimes does. When dawn finally broke, the storm had moved on, leaving the air washed clean and still. She opened her eyes, the dark of them deep and steady despite the weakness in her limbs. They studied him for a long moment before she spoke, her voice roughened by thirst. He poured water into a tin cup, held it for her as she drank. There were questions he wanted to ask: who she was, what had happened, why she'd been out there alone, but something in her gaze warned him off. Instead, he said only, "You're safe now," though the words felt like more of a hope than a promise. By midday, the quiet was broken by the sound of horses. Shane stepped outside to find a group of riders approaching, their movements in perfect unison. The man at the front was tall, dressed in buckskin, his hair bound with eagle feathers. The moment his eyes found the woman inside, a sharp relief crossed his features. This, Shane realized, was her kin, and not just any kin. The older man's bearing spoke of authority, and the warriors around him waited for his nod before they dismounted. The chief, for there was no doubt that's what he was, introduced himself as Tall Elk. His voice was calm, but there was weight behind it, the kind that didn't need to be raised to be felt. He called the young woman Sama, and in that instant, the pieces began to shift in Shane's mind. The way her eyes had measured him, the quiet pride even in her weakness, it all fit now. She was the daughter of the Comanche chief, the kind of woman whose life was bound by the honor of her people. Tall Elk thanked him with the formality of a man who did not give thanks lightly. From one of the riders, he took the reins of a wild horse, its coat the pale shimmer of silver dust in sunlight, eyes bright with mistrust. Along with it came a pair of silver spurs, gleaming against the dark leather they rested on. "For saving my daughter," Tall Elk said. And yet, in the pause that followed, Shane felt a subtle question hanging between them, a question about motives, about trust. He took the gift anyway, though it felt heavier than its weight in his hands. The next time he saw her, it was by chance, or so he told himself. She came riding down the ridge one afternoon, carrying a basket slung over her arm. Said it was food, though when he looked inside, there were also strips of leather and a bowstring coiled neat. She stayed long enough to mend the bridle of the silver horse, her fingers deft and sure. He offered to show her how to work a lasso in return, and she didn't refuse. After that, the visits began to happen more often, never spoken of, never promised, but always there. They learned each other slowly. She taught him the draw of a bow, correcting his stance with a light hand at his elbow. He showed her how to guide a herd without spooking them, riding low and quiet. The town whispered, and the tribe did too, their voices carrying the same blend of suspicion and curiosity. But in the space between the whispers there were moments, her laughter breaking across the stillness of the pines, his hand brushing hers when they passed a waterskin, the unspoken rhythm of trust building like a campfire coaxed from embers. It might have stayed that way, balanced in the fragile quiet, if not for the smoke on the horizon. Word came fast, bandits moving through the region again. Shane knew the name before anyone spoke it, Rafe Mallory. Once, long ago, they'd ridden together. Now, Rafe was the kind of man who left bodies in ditches and took what he pleased. The scouts said the bandits were headed toward the Comanche camp, and Shane felt the shame settle in his gut like a stone. Sama refused to be hidden away. "They will not take my people while I stand," she told him, and there was no shaking her. Together, they moved through the camp, helping ready the defenses, sharpening blades, binding arrowheads, laying traps where the grass ran high. The night they came, the air was thick with waiting. Shadows slipped along the ridge, then the first shout split the dark. The fight was a blur of movement and noise. Shane fired until his rifle ran dry, then waded in with his fists and the butt of the weapon. Beside him, Sama moved like water, disarming one man, driving another back with a kick that sent his knife skittering. The chaos broke only when Rafe's voice called the retreat. As the riders vanished into the dark, Shane stood breathing hard, the sweat cooling on his skin, the ground littered with the spoils of a failed raid. He turned to find Sama watching him, her bow still in hand. Whatever had been unspoken between them no longer needed words. By morning, the chief had made his decision. In the firelight, with the tribe and the townsfolk gathered, Tall Elk placed his daughter's hand in Shane's. The ceremony was a weaving of two worlds, eagle feathers and lasso knots, blessings spoken in two languages. And though not every face in the crowd was warm, there was a sense, for the first time in Shane's life, that he stood where he was meant to stand. Years later, on the edge of an open range, the sun poured gold across their home. Shane rode with the cattle, his frame still broad but tempered now by the ease of belonging. On the porch, Sama rocked their newborn daughter, the baby's eyes dark and bright as a midnight river. The wind moved through the grass in soft waves, carrying the sound of laughter. The scars of their past were still there, but they had become the seams that held their life together. And if you, passing through this land someday, find someone alone in the storm, stop for them. You might think you're saving them, but more often than not, you'll find they were the one you'd been searching for all along.